Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson, and in this episode, I speak with Omaro Maseli of Source Global Research. Omaro is a senior consultant, LSE law graduate, and holds a dual master's in public policy from Sciences Po Paris and the University of Tokyo. She's advised global consultancies, contributed to research on consulting's evolution, and presented AI futures at the G20. In this conversation, we unpack why the consulting world is shifting beyond brand loyalty, explore the hidden ethical costs of AI, and discuss why the next generation of consultants might need to think like futurists. You're going to want to take notes on this one. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Consultancy Edge, Omaro Maseli. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Matt. How are you doing?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been so excited to speak with you. Of course, you came onto my radar after I found out that you'll be speaking at the Consultancy Growth Network Summit this year, which is a fantastic event that just gets better and better every year. So if any listeners haven't signed up just yet, then that's going to be coming your way from me very, very soon. Omaro, tell us a little bit about your journey through consultancy. I know that you have had experience both within big consultancy, you've had experience working with some of the boutiques and smaller, but you've done so much in your career so far to date. I don't know how you've managed to fit it all in. Tell us about that journey, if you would.
Yeah, of course. So I actually started my journey to consultancies in law. So my background's in law, and then I think what I found as I made my way through internships and stints in the industry was that I was most excited by the innovation happening, kind of in tandem with the law itself. So a lot of legal tech was in development, a lot of talk of AI kind of transforming the way that was done. And so I thought kind of what else was there out there? What else beyond law could I explore that could help me tap into that interest? And so I went into the policy space because I was interested in how kind of policies help shape everything and bring everything together. So again, did a stint in the Breakthrough Institute in California, which is a think tank, again, that specializes in policy in the tech space, but focus on environmental issues. And so, and then I did my degree in public policy. And coming out of that, I thought there's a tech part that I'm interested in. And then just a policy that kind of creates that environment for a lot of these innovations to take place and to take hold. And what better place to explore that than perhaps in a tech consultancy that would allow me to see how these forces come into play and then bring in that kind of business element that helps make that a bit more tangible and help those technology developments kind of manifest in the real world as real solutions to challenges that people are facing, to challenges businesses are facing. And so I came across this role at my previous firm, which is Accenture, where I got to explore technology futures. So I'm really looking at how business trends were intersecting with those technology innovations from VR to AI. And yeah, it was a fascinating time, much bigger organization than where I sit now. Today, I work at Source Global Consulting, which is a boutique consultancy that actually advises some of the large consultancies on their go-to-market strategy, on delivering more impact with their thought leadership. And it's a much smaller organization. I think we're about 50 people compared to the like some 700K at Accenture. So different scale. And I'm sure we'll go into that a little bit, but that's kind of been my journey in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Yeah, I do want to dig into that whole the differences between the likes of Accenture, the huge consultancies versus the boutiques. But I do want to dig into what I call the platformization of consulting. It's nothing new, of course, the marrying of consulting and technology to deliver better solutions. What are some of the sort of trends that you're seeing in that whole space? And I know that AI is inevitably going to come into the conversation with this, but what else are you seeing is really helping consultancies to support their expertise from the technology side?
Yeah, I think one big trend, and perhaps it's just the main one, is some of the consultancies are trying to penetrate the design kind of agency world more in order to marry that tech with the experience piece in order to create better solutions for their customers. So an example is a few years ago, Accenture kind of rebranded their interactive space into what they call Accenture Song, which brought together a few kind of marketing and design agencies they had acquired under one umbrella. But we see other firms doing something similar, like EY, just I think a few weeks ago announced the rebranding of its design kind of element of the brand into, I think it's called EY Studio Plus. Again, bringing in a group of design-led, kind of customer experience focused acquisitions under one umbrella. So I definitely think that the shift is something that firms recognize, and I think just thinking about the challenges some of these clients would be facing at the moment, as you mentioned, there's a lot of challenge in terms of new players coming into the market and technology um, challenging incumbents. So if you think about, let's say, the electric vehicle space, places like China have completely come left field and really transformed and challenged incumbents where a few years ago we might have just thought about like Tesla as the only like leading EV companies, but today it's completely different. And so there's that piece around, more competitors. And so I think there's a recognition that as more players come into play, there is an opportunity to differentiate through experience. And consulting firms are leaning into that and trying to position themselves as that kind of connective tissue that can help their customers connect to tech, connect to experience, and then still bring in that kind of strategy background all in one house as solutions to solve their customer problems. So I think that's a big change.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the what I see out there is a growing number of individuals, solo consultancies even, and micros who seem to be heavily reliant on AI to deliver their solutions. They've been born out of not expertise, but some sort of nous when it comes to technology. And it's replacing that experience, that expertise, the grey hairs, when it comes to providing those sorts of solutions. Do you think that has the potential to really sort of muddy the waters of consultancy and to cause buyers, I guess, to be much more discerning and much more diligent about how they buy consulting?
I think that definitely is already happening. And I think certainly for maybe more for less complex projects, um, the field has become more level and yeah, smaller kind of solar micro consultancies do have space to kind of step up and help deliver on projects related to that. But I do still think that we're not yet at a place um, where these maybe AI-led firms can completely replace the kind of capability of huge firms when it comes to more complex projects, because that just requires such a multifaceted team, expertise, and that technology will still play a role, but that expertise and that human element, I think you can't do without.
Yeah, yeah. And so let's talk about, of course, the differences between working inside a huge behemoth consultancy like Accenture and now working in a boutique consultancy. I know that there have been a great number of boutiques that have been born out of, consultants leading some of those larger organizations, seeing how it's done there, perhaps seeing that there can be another way, that they're inspired to create a different experience sometimes because of what they've seen inside a big consultancy. What are some of the sort of starkest differences that you see between the two dynamics?
Hmm. It's a good question. Um, so in terms of the biggest differences, I think perhaps there's an element of the level of responsibility that you have to take up as a consultant, because in bigger firms, there's just so many levels of hierarchy between you and the client and your within your team. You'll have so many layers, whereas in a smaller firm, I feel like there's more of it tends to be more of a flatter kind of hierarchy, and everyone's just kind of expected to step up. And so, yeah, the scope of my responsibilities in the smaller firm, I feel, has grown tremendously. Not to say better or worse, it's just different. And I think that's something that I think wasn't as obvious before joining the smaller firm.
I feel, Amara, that you've got your finger on the pulse of what's going on in consultancy through your experience, but also through the research and the work that you do, of course. If you had to kind of perhaps project forward, let's go forward 5 years, in 2030, if you had to write a manifesto for consulting in 5 years' time, what do you think you would say? What would be the sort of general theme of that?
I think that the general theme would be around consulting in a world where the brand halo effect no longer applies. And by that, I mean, what we see in our research, and we've been collecting data on the consulting industry for a few years now. And historically, our data has been quite steady in terms of who who clients of these consulting firms see as the leaders in different areas. This year, that's changed, and we see a greater flux. So we asked about things like, who do you think is the leading authority on this topic, and whether it's about workforce transformation or taking advantage of the latest technologies. And although that's been steady previously, we're seeing greater dynamism in the data. So, and we talk about this world moving from one that is uncertain, that is, you don't know when the market will improve, but you know it will be, versus one today that is unreliable. So that is, you don't know if it will ever become stable again. And so you have to operate in a different mindset. And within that context, clients of consulting firms are really just looking for firms that really deliver true value. So the brand halo is not enough. Firms really do need to step up. They really need to be differentiated. They need to be cost effective, and they need to really demonstrate their value. And because clients are operating on tighter budgets, they're operating in this unreliable world, and they need to know that the partners that they're working with, the consulting firms, are really able to deliver when and where they need it. And so I think that would be the message. The brand halo is dead.
Wonderful. No, I love that theme. I think also built into that, I've always felt that boutiques are really very well positioned to take some of the business that traditionally would have gone to some of the big names in consulting. Do you think that's something that's set to continue for some time? Do you see that there will be a sort of changing of the order of things?
Again, I think that's possible. But like I say, I think that will have to be in maybe more routine work versus more complex strategy work, because I think there's still that recognition of expertise still being one of the most important things that clients look for when engaging with consulting firms.
Yeah. And going back a little while to sort of the AI side of things as well. I know that you've spent years exploring the ethics of emotional and generative AI. What have you got any sort of reflections on that? Perhaps is there anything sort of deeply uncomfortable that you feel about AI that most of your peers are missing out on?
So obviously there's a lot of talk these days about AI and the ethics. And a few years ago, I wrote a piece in HBR about the ethics of AI, and we talked about it a lot in terms of the front end cost that might arise out of it. So things like bias being implemented at scale, whether it's through, I don't know, police departments using it to screen people who might potentially be committing crimes, and how that might tend to nudge them towards certain ethnicities versus others, and so on. However, more recently, I've been really fascinated about the back end of AI. It's the AI you don't see. It's about the ethics of the people who have to review thousands and thousands of videos of harmful content in order to help us, in order to tag and label the data, in order to build the algorithm. There's this whole back end, there's this whole industry happening behind. It's almost like the latest um, sweat factories, but for AI. And I think that this is something that people recognize, but I think more needs to be done to bring this to the fore. So as we choose which AI platforms we want to use, which large language models we want to use, we need to question, are there ones that are more transparent in the way that they acquire data, the way they train it, versus others? Or yeah, we just need to be more diligent, because I'm not saying that we can't or shouldn't be using AI, but I think we could scrutinize our sources a bit more and what platforms we choose to engage.
I think that scrutiny does already translate to the clients as well. Do you think they are demanding enough to question the source of the information
Yeah,
and the validity of some of those assumptions?
I honestly don't think we're there yet. I think there's more and more people are talking about some of these risks, but I think that um, there's just this hype and this kind of collective hysteria around AI at the moment, where everyone just wants to get on it and they don't want to feel like they're behind. And so it's kind of like, let's get on board and we'll figure out everything after, rather than let's take a bit of a cautious approach. Let's question where this is coming from. Let's do our due diligence before diving in.
Yeah, I feel like everybody's jumped off the cliff of AI and they're building the plane on the way down a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, Amara, you've studied in London, Paris, and Tokyo,
Mhm.
and now you consult globally. I meet a lot of consultancies who consider themselves a global proposition, but perhaps they struggle to really do business in certain areas of the globe. Do you think there is some sort of limiting belief there? What are your observations on how to become a truly global consultancy?
Oh, that is a really good question, Matt.
Thank you.
So how do you, so I think that um, my experience kind of studying in different places has exposed me to the fact that each question, each perspective you have could have so many different angles to it. And I think that's the same that applies to any kind of client problem wherever they're located. And so um, to be a truly global consultant, I think the first thing you need to do is you need to diversify your sources. When you're trying to keep up to date with the latest industry trends, you need to make sure you are reading news from different countries, different locations, different perspectives, so you can bring that into the work that you do, and you can be better positioned to advise with a global perspective in mind. There's definitely something there about also just empathy, which sounds a little bit cheesy, but when clients come to you with problems and they're coming from different parts of the world, you don't have to be from there. You don't have to have been there to really understand. What you need to do is be a good listener. What you need to do is be able to extract and really dissect a problem and get to the core. And you can only do that through listening and reading widely, which will expand your capacity to listen well, and therefore um, provide solutions.
I love that because yeah, it comes down to humans dealing with humans. I mean, that's what's really happening, isn't it? Especially in the world of consultancy, where people are the business. And you didn't mention at any point there anything around culture. Do you think that sometimes one of those perceived barriers is the lack of cultural understanding in certain regions and a fear perhaps of putting a foot wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that fear, and I think you need to be, there's a fear of that, but you need to recognize that it's okay. You can't know about everyone's culture. We have to be open to stepping in, asking questions when you're not sure, and things like that. And also, if you recruit a diverse team, it goes without saying that that also helps expand your team's capability to understand these needs from a global perspective. And in when I worked at Accenture, I think, and even at my firm now, I think there's such a diversity of perspective that it means that whether we're dealing with a project in Uzbekistan or one in Japan, it's like we are positioned to be able to at least bring that initial view and work in partnership with that client to better understand the problems from their perspective, and then therefore be well positioned to advise. Yeah.
Wonderful. I wonder, we've talked about, of course, the technology side of consulting, how that platformization has happened. I wonder, again, projecting forward, perhaps making some sort of crystal ball predictions about the world of consultancy in a few years' time. Omaro, do you feel that will the next generation of consultants be coders? Will they be philosophers? Will they be influencers, or something else, do you think?
Ooh, the next generation of consultants, I think they have to be a bit of everything. Um, I think that the world today is just so complex, and there's just so many facets to it. And being able to go deep on something is great, but the breadth of skills so is important too. If you're advising on tech strategy, you kind of need to know at a baseline how the tech works. I'm not saying you need to be an expert coder, but maybe understanding some of the logic that goes into developing AI, the biases, the way it's trained, in order to be able to give a perspective on the risks of taking a certain tech strategy or not. So I think that you need to be well-rounded. Philosophy definitely there because you need that to think about some of the biases and of the ethics. And I think most importantly, you just need to be curious. You need to be curious, you need to read around, you need to follow influencers, you need to follow thought leaders in HBR, you need to follow everything in between. And that will help you really be able to provide a differentiated perspective to the work you bring.
Wonderful. Omaro, we've kind of talked a bit of forward thinking, and I'd see you very much as a futurist when it comes into the world of consulting. But I do want to talk about your journey because I feel like we skipped over that a little bit. What was we didn't talk about how you got really into the world of consulting. What was that pivotal moment that made you decide to venture into this space?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had just done my law degree, I'd done my policy degree, and I found that what really kind of kept me up at night and got me excited was a lot of what I was reading around those topics. So I remember I used to listen to this podcast called How I Built This by Guy Raz, and great podcast. Like he interviews really interesting business leaders, startup founders who've had really successful businesses, and just getting into a mindset of like the how they identify some of the problems in their mind, how they turn to technology or not, and the kind of business models they were exploring. I'd also read magazines like Wired, and yeah, I was very interested in the technology. Some of it was really far into the future stuff, like flying taxis, but it was just really interesting. And I just thought to myself that I wanted to be in a space that explored these topics more, and I didn't at the time really know where that would be per se, because up to that point, it was all I'm going to do law.
Yeah.
And that was kind of all I knew. And so through the job kind of search process, I came across this role at Accenture, which was all focused on tech and business futures. And I think that's the beauty of kind of interview processes, is that you learn about the job as well. And in the process of going through that, I was so fascinated by what I was reading. I mean, imagine a job where you just get to read and write about topics like AI, ethics, VR, augmented reality in the real world, how that can be applied to businesses. Like it was just so fascinating to me. And I just thought I hadn't heard about this when I thought about consulting. I just heard about like PowerPoint, but I didn't really hear about these kind of think about consultancies or like the thought leadership teams as somewhere where it was more like a think tank. You could really um, do true blue sky thinking, and that really excited me. And of course, my interview had I basically got interrogated by some really, really smart people, and I was just so intrigued by it and decided to give it a go. And the rest is kind of history. I just knew I wanted to be around people who were, yeah, thinking beyond the next 3 years and people who would really challenge that. And it was very clear to me through that process that this was the space to do it. And
Fantastic.
yeah.
Did you encounter any sort of unexpected challenges along the way, perhaps early on in that transition from the world of law into consultancy? Were there any sort of hurdles or blockers that you had to break down?
Um, I think one challenge I had going in and early on was discovering the importance of stakeholder management and how that plays such a big role in your experience in the job, and especially when you're working in thought leadership, as I did at the time, where you spend a year working on a report, you put your all into it, and then your stakeholder changes, and they're like, "We're not doing that anymore." And I think at first. Probably took that to heart a little bit, but it was also a growth moment because I learned very quickly that you have to be dynamic. You need to be agile. You need to keep moving. You need to figure out new ways to leverage the resources, not all gone to waste. And so, yeah, I remember we developed this like really interesting trend piece. And so we decided to kind of park it, but create a resource bank for our colleagues. And eventually, a few years later, some of those insights fed into a bigger trends offering. So it didn't all go to waste, but I think, yeah, sometimes, the job description only highlights so much of the job,
Yeah.
but actually there's a big people element to it too. And I think growing into that and learning how to navigate kind of the complexities of the different personalities within the consulting ecosystem is something that I yeah had to learn.
And talking about that people side, I wonder was there any particular sort of mentor or figure who influenced your decision to become a consultant or influenced your journey through the world of consultancy?
Um, yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint any one person. I always say I was so lucky to have a like a team or a group of mentors who kind of supported me along the journey in different ways within. But I think if I were to point one person, it was the person who one of my interviews, Athena, um, who at Accenture, who she really drilled me in that interview, and that I feel like that made me know that I was going to be challenged and I was going to grow as a person. And that kind of momentum where never changed with her through my journey at Accenture. And she's no longer there as well. But I grew so much as a person working with her. And she's someone who at heart is a futurist and always challenged me to think in more and more abstract ways. And that was such a gift because now I think one of my superpowers within the consulting field is that ability to think really left field about topics you should be talking about. Like I recently did a piece about Gen Alpha, who are under the oldest ones of them are under 14, but I think that consulting leaders should be thinking about them and their clients should be thinking about them now because they have such an impact in the market. You wouldn't believe it. And so I just think that ability to really think outside the box and bring these really niche ideas to the conversation is something she taught me and has been my kind of source of differentiation in my journey so far.
Wonderful. I do want to touch because we've talked about that kind of futurist aspect a couple of times already. I wonder what it takes to be a futurist, Amara. Do you feel that you do you learn that from somewhere? Or are there sources of information that inform your ability to be able to predict what's coming or to sort of ratify some of your assumptions? Is it around true sort of innovation and ideation from scratch? Where do your ideas and where do your kind of futurist ideas come from?
I think first of all, it's a recognition that you can't predict the future. Because you mentioned the word predict, and I that stood out to me. I think the first thing to being a futurist is recognizing that the future can really go in any way. And as I said, we're now in an unreliable world, so it's like any scenario goes. And a lot of firms, a lot of people, leaders, and organizations have a tendency to think about future thinking or scenario planning as like linear from today, and you go plus or minus the baseline. But the gift with futures is that you get to really break out of that linear thinking and group together kind of different market signals you can see in different ways, and just kind of go wild with your imagination. And I think that's the beauty of it. So in terms of how to do that, one, as I say, just recognize you can't predict the future. Two, read from, like, get inspiration from as many sources as you can, small or big. Like I say, look at what people are doing on TikTok. Look at what people are doing in business journal articles. It can be as lowbrow, it can be as highbrow, but there are these signals everywhere. And then you just throw them up in the air, see where they land, and imagine, what might come out of that. I think there's also something about learning from different countries' experiences. So one thing I like to talk about was during COVID, when it first hit, it was like so bizarre for us to think that we were in a lockdown. But actually, this had happened elsewhere before. In kind of in East Asia, there was an outbreak just a few years ago, of a virus where they had to also contain people, and then it was in that I remember reading an article about Alibaba, and how it was in that outbreak, I think it was MRSA, that Alibaba became AliExpress, and like it became this huge e-commerce bubble because they were forced into lockdown and they had to then shift online. And so there were lessons there already. And because we are so of a tendency to focus on our world here and now, we might miss out on those signals that are
Yeah.
happening in different places. So I think there are lessons to be learned elsewhere, and you can really think, as I say, as big as or as small. Another example I would say is in there's a very small probability, for example, that one day we don't have any sunshine because of a extreme kind of solar weather event, let's say, just this completely left field. What do we do? How do we survive? And then we could already draw some inspiration on things that are happening in places like the Nordics, where they have to spend in large parts of the year in a lot of darkness. Like,
Yeah.
what do they do? Um, there are already examples of things happening in small scale. So I think being open to, yeah, drawing inspiration from nature, from other countries, from low highbrow sources. I think you just need to open your mind, and be open to kind of receiving what's out there.
Yeah, wonderful. I wonder, Amara, I wondered again, reflecting on your career, I wonder if there's a particular win or an event that really kind of stands out in your career. A moment perhaps when you thought, this is what I was meant to do.
I think a moment for me was when I got to present some of our futures trends at the G20. It was a side event where we got to present trends to a group of entrepreneurs. And I think the tone of our event was very different from the rest of um, the um, the presentations that were given, because we just took it to the future, I know, and we brought ideas around VR. We got an event around, new ways that firms could think about nearshoring some of their production, um, exploring like technologies like 3D printing to do things on site. So it was very kind of out of the box thinking, um, and it was a moment for me because a lot of what we've been doing over the last few years has been mediated through screens.
Mm.
And it's such an amazing opportunity to be in front of a group of entrepreneurs who are just ready to soak in your ideas and see their faces light up as you present the trends. And I think this is what it's all about. It's about delivering impact. It's about, I think thought leadership is about molding ideas, shaping the market rather than just mirroring it. And in moments like that, I just think like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to shape the thinking. I want to give someone a perspective they haven't thought about, and just give them a gaze into what the future could be, even if it never manifests. Just that active, you can imagine this, and that's it.
Of course, I mean, consultancies thrive on that impact as well, Amaro. I just wonder that we do in the world of consultancy hold too much stock perhaps in the financial performance of consultancies. All the league tables seem to be based around financial performance. What do you consider to be the true measure of success for a consultancy beyond the financial side of things?
Ooh, I think the real value that consultancies bring beyond the financial aspect could be just simply that they helped their client reframe their thinking around a certain idea. Because if not, what are we here for? If I can say that, it's um, there's so much that firms like clients can do themselves. And I would even say that these days, because technology is democratizing access to a lot of capabilities, and for competitors, but even for the clients themselves, like they almost are to some extent being able to do things themselves that they couldn't do before. There's really a challenge there and an opportunity for consulting firms to differentiate or to have a demonstrate that they can offer something different. So I think, yeah, really for success, um, to be a successful consulting firm, I think success means um, offering a new perspective and helping them reframe a problem in a new way. Yeah.
I think another angle to that is, of course, sustainability. I guess it's about achieving all of that whilst remaining a sustainable proposition. I know that sustainability is a passion of yours, Amaro. Where do you think consultancies are perhaps not meeting their required obligations when it comes to sustainability? And perhaps that includes the use of AI, which we know is a huge draw on resources. But yeah, what are your viewpoints on the balancing of great consultancy, creating impact, and being a sustainable business?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because yeah, you're right. Like um, AI is a big problem at the moment in terms of it being sustainable. And I know a lot of big firms are just investing so much in Gen AI, and really actively encouraging their people to use them, especially because the market is tight and these consulting firms need to operate in a more efficient way. So they're seeking efficiencies through things like AI. In terms of how they balance it, I think there's just something there about raising more awareness, just sticking to the AI story here, amongst their people about like the impact of their use. So, if you're encouraging teams to use AI, it's like, okay, that's fine. But should they be just using it for more complex issues, and kind of limiting the amount of times they search, or are there ways they can yeah, adapt the way they use it to make it much more um, to balance that need to grow and operate efficiently with that recognition that perhaps it's right now not the most sustainable way. And to my point earlier about kind of vetting what platforms we use, like there are firms that are, they have contracts, they've signed contracts with um, AI companies to provide kind of these large language models, but we also need to do due diligence on the firms that we are engaging for use of their large language models, the same way as we would vet our supply chains for sustainability practices, because yeah, this is part of that as well. So I think there's a question of, what platforms are you engaging? Are they the most sustainable in the way they operate? And I think that's something that I'm not sure many consultancies are really thinking about right now. Everyone's trying to get that first mover advantage, and I think we just need to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Amaro, we've reached that point in the conversation where we turn to our regular feature, snog, marry, avoid, and it's not the one you think. A snog is a quick win in the world of consultancy. What is one quick win that you think everybody should know about?
Yeah, I think in terms of a quick win, um, I there is this feeling that there's two parts of a strategy. One is the idea, and one is how you present it. And I feel like in my experience in consulting, you see all sorts of ways people visualize their ideas, they show it. And there's this feeling that you're either kind of a creative or you're not. I think a quick win for everyone working consulting is, the way you demonstrate your ideas really matters, and can really influence how you deliver on impact to your clients. So everyone can be creative. Keep a reference guide of any innovative way you see anyone demonstrating any idea. I personally love going on Pinterest, even just to look at ways slides are designed and so on, just have that as a reference guide, and keep that there for when I need it. So that's a quick win, I think.
Wonderful. I love that. A marry is an essential. What's one tool, strategy, or practice that you absolutely couldn't live without in the world of consultancy?
Yeah, we've touched on this already, but for me, it's really that marrying of futures thinking and scenario planning. So um, make finding a scenario culture or futures culture within your organization by maybe regularly doing exercises where you imagine different scenarios for different things. Like consider it a fire drill, if this happened. What would we do if this happened? What would we do? And really making that a firm-wide exercise that happens regularly. And I think by doing that, you help, yeah, really expand your thinking, and you have this playground of ideas where you can shape and reshape, rethink the way something should look, and start to plan for 10, 15, 20 years later.
Yeah, I love that. I've found it useful to kind of scenario plan around what's the worst case, what's the best case, and then what's the most likely outcome as well. It prepares you for all sorts of scenarios, can really minimize the impact of whatever's coming.
And just to build on that, I think one question, as well as best case and worst case, is just like, what wild card could emerge out of this? So it's like
Yeah.
something that is just so left field that but could potentially still emerge out of this. And I think that's a question we should all be asking.
Yeah, or prepare for no sunshine, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's an avoid, Amara? Something that what the consultancies really need to ditch, get rid of as quickly as possible that's not serving them.
Yeah, I think as someone who's worked and written, advised on a lot of thought leadership strategy, I think firms need to ditch this mindset that thought leadership is just a marketing tool.
Mm.
And by this, I mean a lot of firms see it as a marketing tool, so it limits the scale of thinking, of ideas that they bring to the table. And then you see things like there are loads of authors on it, but they haven't written it, or the research methods all start to look the same. They haven't really explored new ways of maybe trying to quantify the issue they're describing. So all they're looking for are like big numbers. So I think there's definitely a scope to reshape that and start to think about thought leadership as more a molder of ideas than a mirror. And so giving it the time it needs, exploring new data sets, exploring um, just new ways of approaching it and moving from this checklist mindset of thought leadership. And I think in today's world, there's just so much content, and how do you really differentiate yourself in this space where everyone's creating content? Gen AI is going to make it worse. I think there's a real opportunity for people to slow it down and do kind of more with less, and really bring truly innovative, like market shaping ideas to the table. Yeah.
Wonderful. Amara, I've really enjoyed that. And listen, where can people connect with you and find out more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Omaro Maseli, but also you can check out Source Global Research on their website. We have insights, blogs, reports covering the consulting industry, and feel free to reach out if you want to learn more about what we do.
And come see Amara speak, of course, at the Consultancy Growth
Yes,
Network Summit coming
of
up
course.
soon.
Yeah.
Amara, thank you so much for joining me today on the Consultancy Edge.
Thank you, Matt, and take care.